You're listening to the Empowered Divorce Podcast, where you practice being the chooser in your life again, one day at a time. Thanks for joining me. Hello, my beautiful. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening. Thank you for always supporting. Thank you for your emails, your comments, your reviews, all the things. It means so much, and it continues to grow our audience. So more and more women like you or who are having a divorce because of betrayal, trauma, and abuse feel validated, feel heard, and are learning how to become the choosers in their life again, and how to step into that empowerment. That's why I keep doing this, because of how many of you say this is impacting you, and it makes it all worth it. It makes what I've experienced in my own life worth it. As hellacious as it was, knowing that we can together be chain breakers of so many limiting beliefs, ways that we believed about ourself, relationships, ourself in relationships that limited our ability to choose, that limited our ability to thrive. So many of you are breaking massive chains, ancestral chains, family chains, where you're doing things different and you're braving a new path. It is so inspiring, and I absolutely love hearing from each of you. I know it can be really hard to continue to do your healing work as you're navigating a divorce, wherever you are at in your journey. One of the things that I felt passionate to do is create a coaching membership where women can come every week and get coached and also feel the support from other women. I do have women in there of all different stages in their journey through healing from betrayal. I have some that are divorced, some that are still trying to navigate it. Either way, I wanted to create a space for women who can take their healing to that next level, who can get as much access to resources, to tools, to concepts, to me, where you can keep that healing ball rolling, so to speak. I think my coaching membership has been an incredible way for so many of my women in this membership to unlock some of the stuckness, so to speak, that these limiting beliefs about themselves have kept them from really being the chooser in their life, from really thriving. We get so caught up in survival mode. We get so caught up in the busyness of trying to just survive that a lot of times get ourselves back into that same situation where we feel stuck, where we feel victim, where we feel like there's no hope and this life that has happened to us is miserable. Or we just feel like every day we're still trying so hard to put one foot in front of the other, and it can feel a little bit hopeless when you don't know what your future holds because you're not really creating it. I have put so many perks to this membership because I wanted it to be easy and affordable, where you can get as much access to help and to resources to meet you where you are at. One of the things that I tell my ladies when they first join the group is that it's really vulnerable. Yet one of the things that got thrown out of whack through betrayal and abuse is your vulnerability. Remember Hope, Ray, and I talking about your wise femininity, that trifecta of sensitivity, intuition, and vulnerability. Well, one of the things that we need to realign and get back online is our vulnerability. When you show up to group and you're coaching in front of other women, it's vulnerable. But I've created the space to be safe enough so that you can practice this vulnerability and start to trust yourself again in that vulnerability, so that when you're ready to navigate another relationship, you've got this practice under your belt. This reason and so many other reasons as to why this membership can be incredibly beneficial to you, learning to trust yourself, having healthy intimacy, body positivity, really learning about your self-worth and value, building self-confidence, having emotional support, and learning how to cultivate even more emotional maturity, learning how to love yourself, building emotional resilience. All of this is what you're going to gain from being a part of this membership and accessing all of the resources that I have for you. So for more information about that, head over to the show notes or go to amiewoolsey.com. Those who are members get a savings on brain spotting sessions. So many perks that I've tried to include in this membership to make it as easy and affordable for you to get access to so much support. One of the things that a lot of the women that I work with want support around is how to navigate when your kids come back from the other parent's house and your kids are, quote, worse. How many of you have experienced that? If you haven't experienced this yet, hang in there with me today because number one, this is very typical, very common, especially for those of you who have had high conflict divorces where you do have a parent that is emotionally immature, a parent that really doesn't share your same parenting values. I've done a lot of episodes on parallel parenting versus co-parenting. If you are anticipating that this parent isn't going to share the same values as you, or will parent completely different from you, the rules of the house are going to be completely different. If we're not on the same page as co-parents, then you might experience your kids coming back from their house. They are dysregulated and it feels, oh my gosh, the kids come home and they are worse. Their attitude is worse. Their behavior is worse. They're fighting, bickering. They have a little bit more sass. Their hygiene is worse. You're like, did you even brush your teeth or shower the entire weekend? Or my gosh, have you seriously not had a vegetable the entire weekend or the entire week that you were with your dad? All the things, right? And your brain says, oh my gosh, they are worse. I totally remember feeling like this. Hearing my son sass me was a shock. He had never before done that. And then the outbursts from the teens and the disrespect that I felt around rules and limits in the home, I felt like I was then taking a day or two to regulate them. And then they'd go back to the parents' house and the cycle would repeat all over again. I dreaded it sometimes. I felt like I was just repairing the damage that was done over at the other parent's house. I get the junk, he gets the fun. Okay, so how do we take these situations and have an empowered divorce? Well, I want to offer you a few things to consider and practice. I promise I will push your brain today in a good way. In a good way, I promise. This is what I do a lot in my coaching, right? We push our brains, push our human brains to believe something different, especially when we're not exactly loving the results that we're getting from our current thinking. But first, if you want to think that your kids are coming home worse and you want to believe that you get the worst of it and the other parent gets the best of it, you totally can. That is okay. I'd like you to perhaps drop into some conscious awareness around how you then respond, how you show up when you believe this, right? Like when you think, oh my gosh, they are worse and I have to clean up the mess. This sucks. This is sad. How frustrating. It shouldn't be like this. Then how are you responding to your kids? How are you showing up? What do you see yourself doing or not doing when you feel this towards them, towards yourself? What additional thoughts does this bring in? For example, when I believed this and the kids came home and were arguing and bickering and sass talk to me, I was really pissed at my ex. So I immediately went to blame, right? It was like, if he wasn't so blank, then these kids wouldn't be showing up this way. I was looking at the behavior of my kids and believing that it was wrong, that they shouldn't be doing this. They shouldn't be arguing. They shouldn't be debating the rules. They shouldn't be talking to me like this. Then I was responding in frustration. So my tone was a little bit sharper. I started to yell, knock it off. Why are you acting like this? You know that we don't do this in this home. Sometimes I'd even run away from them. Like I would just go hide in my room and let them duke it out. I was just isolating myself because it was just too much to fix. I felt that frustration seep into them. And then it brought in more thoughts like, oh my gosh, I'm such a horrible mom. I'll never be able to fix this. My kids are going to be ruined. They're going to hate me. They're going to hate me more than the other parent because I'm the one having to clean up the mess and reset the rules and the limits in the home. And my brain just went to all the ways that I hate him again, which led me right back to blame. Can you relate to some of this? Maybe you have figured this out better than I did, but in the beginning, this was a really huge challenge for me. I would tell my mom on those pickup days, well, going to get the kids and then it's detox time. Wish me luck, because it was a thing. And I really felt like I had to do this detox and it was so miserable and it was so annoying and I shouldn't have to do this. Okay, so even though I felt like there was nothing I could do about it, I felt like this was just another thing ruining my life and my children, and I felt helpless towards it. But I had a realization one day. I was waiting for them to come home and I was geared up for the worst, right? I had that thought. And even that gearing up, maybe some of you notice that anticipatory anxiety where you're like, oh my gosh, how are they going to come home? What's going to be the latest drama? How are they going to treat me? Is this going to be a fight today? Just notice what your body is going through as you're getting ready to switch kids again. What's that like for you? Maybe you can relate to that term, gearing up, to what it's going to be like when they come back. While I was sitting there gearing up, waiting for them to come back, I had this really strong thought. I had this thought, what if this isn't wrong? What if how they are coming home isn't wrong, but right? I know my brain did a little gymnastics around that too, but hear me out. With what I knew about how they were being taken care of over there at the other person's house, what I knew was probably being fed to them based on what the kids even told me, what I knew about the rules and the limits and the boundaries, what I knew about the discord and the chaos, the things that the other parent in that place were saying and saying about me because they were being reported back to me. The lack of routine that I know was happening over there, the lack of sleep regulation, the lack of consistency. With everything that I knew and then could only assume outside of that, what was happening over there, then they were coming home exactly as they were supposed to. Why were they supposed to come home regulated, calm, agreeable, and adjusted? I don't even come out of conversations with my ex regulated, calm, agreeable, or adjusted. So that was the first major shift that I had in how I thought and what I believed, which when that shift happened, now I wasn't surprised or shocked or appalled at the quote worse behavior. I was more understanding, accepting, and regulated. I wasn't anticipating because I expected it. It made sense if that's how they came home. I was able to make space for their dysregulation and not make it mean anything about me or mothering or make it even mean something about them. They just had a different experience with a different parent. So they're coming home very appropriate to what they just experienced. I didn't even need to feel like I had to fix it because I knew that just by keeping my space safe enough, just by keeping myself regulated and the space consistent and regulated, that was enough for them to re-regulate. And then they would. I didn't even need to put a time frame on it. If they took and needed 3, 4, 5 days to re-regulate, especially in the beginning, right? When they're still trying to adjust to the new norm and the two different rules of the parents' houses, that was okay. I was okay that I could provide a space safe enough for them to regulate with all of that dysregulation. In fact, the more I let go of trying to fix them or counter the quote worse part of their behavior, the less time it actually took for them to adjust because I was in more of a secure space myself. The fears that are underneath this thought that kids come home worse are real fears. However, I do think it's important to check those fears because leading from fear, parenting from fear is never going to be sustainable. But just take time to be aware of what those are for you. Fears like my child will end up being a bully. They're going to end up being just like the other parent. They're going to like the other parent more. They're going to end up hating me. And all of these rules I'm going to lose them. I'm going to lose their love. Notice all of the fears for you. And when you think about all of those fears, what does that feel like? Notice how that impacts your body. Notice how that impacts your actions. What do you do when you feel that? Are you more lenient in the rules, limits, and boundaries? Because you're worried that if you have all the rules and they're going to leave you and not love you, so maybe you just loosen up? Are you maybe buying their love? Are you becoming extreme in the rules and boundaries to try and compensate for the lack of rules and limits over at the other house? Are you arguing back and reacting? Are you bashing the other parent and blaming the other parent? Just notice with curiosity, not judgment, how you are showing up when you have these fears because you think, oh my gosh, they're worse. How does that feel? And when you feel those emotions, how are you showing up? This shift is really shifting into reality, right? The thought that they shouldn't be worse, this shouldn't happen, that's arguing with reality. And then because I was expecting the worst, my anticipation of it put me in that heightened state of emotion, which impacted how I showed up and responded to my kids. Even when I didn't say much of all, which was most of the time in my case, I just went silent. I was trying not to say the wrong thing, but I was still thinking it and I was still feeling it in my body. This isn't right. This isn't fair. This shouldn't be happening. How dare him? Blah, blah, blah. Right. Back to blame. I was still feeling all of that, even though it might not have been coming out of my mouth. Because I have all these little empath children with high EQs, they knew it. They still felt it. And then it further dysregulated them. And no shame for myself and how I did that in the beginning. I was doing my best at the time. But once I had this aha moment, it shifted things. I started to have a completely different experience with it. I reminded myself of what I can control and what I can't. I did another episode earlier on creating a healing home and what you can do in your home within your control to foster a place to help your kids' dysregulation when they do come home like this. How you set up your space is what you can control. And this doesn't mean that you set it up perfectly. It doesn't mean that you aren't going to have negative emotions in your space. In fact, not only is that impossible, it's not healthy. The key to secure is repair, not perfect. You do not have to do this perfect. You won't. You're not supposed to. Just like they are not supposed to come home from a dysregulated person, an environment, and be regulated. You are not supposed to parent perfectly. You can always practice repair and repair as quickly as you realize there is a need. Hey, kids, when you come home, I felt off my game and that came out on you a little bit sideways. I am so sorry. And then whatever you feel like the injury was, you repair. So maybe that was like, when I said how you were acting is completely ridiculous and knock it off, I'm sure that wasn't helpful for you. And I'm sorry. I'd like to find a different way to support you when you behave that way, because I'm not okay with that behavior, but I am totally okay with your feelings that might have caused it. Most of the time, we can diffuse our kids by asking questions, making observations, and then allowing space for them to respond and process. I cannot stress enough how important that is to allow space after you ask a question or make an observation rather than jumping right in and answering for them. Give them time, even if they don't respond or answer, that's okay too. The more you continue to ask questions, be curious, make observations, I promise their brain is processing. Hey, I'm noticing that you're arguing with your sibling a lot when you come home. What's going on? Do you notice that? What are you feeling? I even started pointing out patterns to my kids like, hey, I've been noticing that when I pick you up, you're not as talkative as you usually are with me. I learned something from that observation that my son likes to take the car ride home from his parents to just relax because things at dad's were fun, but really exhausting. Now that I can totally handle and it makes absolute sense, right? Hey, kids, I'm noticing that there's been a lot more arguing. Do you all notice the same thing? Why do you think that is? What can I do to help? Because this isn't really the kind of space that I want to have in our home for us. It's okay to feel upset, but the limit is when you start yelling at each other. These are just some examples of how you can approach this to help your kids gain more awareness to their own emotions. Remember, they're still learning how to have emotional intelligence. This is a great opportunity for you to help them become aware of that. I had a friend ask me one time when I was telling her of my shift that I had around this, and she said, "Oh my gosh, but this is so unfair that you have to do all of this parenting and making up for the other parents' lack of it." And to be honest, for a minute or two, maybe 10, I felt very validating, right? Like, sheesh, yeah, I wouldn't have to do all this if the other parent just parented the same and we had the same values and same emotional IQ. I actually didn't really want to believe that this was unfair. I didn't like how he felt when I thought this is unfair. It put me in victim state. I really actually was grateful that I could. I was grateful that I could take these opportunities and use them while I still had these kids in my home to teach them about emotional intelligence. And even if a lot of these unfair moments were because of the other parent, I was committed to showing them what another life experience looked like when they come back to my space. When you are not approaching from fear or control, anger, or the belief that they shouldn't be acting this way, and more like, gosh, there's a reason that they're acting this way. And how can I help them become more aware of themselves and support them, as well as remind them of the rules, limits, and values in this home? So be aware of your thoughts and your beliefs and what emotions those are creating in you. And when you feel that way, how are you showing up? Are you liking the results? When you think that they are worse, that this shouldn't be, what are your results? You can totally believe this. But like Dr. Phil says, how's that working for you? What if they are behaving exactly as they should be because of where they just came from and what they just experienced? I bet you can relate and understand. I bet you can feel compassion and make space for them to feel their feelings while reminding them of the rules and the limits and the boundaries in your home. I bet you can ask them questions and help them become more aware of how they are reacting and responding to their big emotions. Again, I want to validate that everyone has their own unique situations. And yet I'm hoping that the principle I'm offering here is resonating with you and you can apply that to your own situation. What you believe about your kids, how this divorce and the other parent is impacting them absolutely affects how you show up in their life. And you are a huge part of their life. You always will be when you choose to be. Why not believe that your kids are capable, that your kids are resilient, that no matter what, you will love them and you will be there for them, even in their worst? Because you can create the experience you want to have with them when you stay in your control bubble and you can show up for them the way that you want, because you absolutely can. Take care, everybody.